We're going to go ahead and get started. Today we're going to take a look at assignment 1, kind of looking at techniques on how to model the LEM bar stool. There are some slight differences between the actual LEM bar stool and the one that we're modeling, even though they look almost identical. Dustin, right, was pointing out that that this area in here on ours actually angles, has a slight angle to it, whereas the actual LEM bar stool does not. We're going to go ahead and leave that angle in there, and also probably this one too, but we'll see how far we get into it today. So at any rate, there's a few minor adjustments and changes to the stool to note. So I think the first way to approach this is we have on Blackboard we've given you these two images that have most of the dimensions on them, and we're going to go ahead and actually place those images into our Rhino file and scale them to being the full size so that we can start to utilize it as a trace. So if everybody wants to jump on Blackboard and download these two images, that'd be awesome. And the other kind of nice thing is are these two images that Joe Anderson so nicely rendered out for us, that kind of just give a little more insight into what's happening on the bottom of the chair, which is part of the assignment. So the underside brackets and seat frame. I don't believe. Well, actually I don't know what I got here. That one's not as useful. So this LEM bar stool, the second one, is that underside. So you might want to download this as well, so you have it for a reference guide. A lot of these kind of dimensions aren't necessarily, we don't have a lot of the dimensions, and so that's why inserting the picture frame of it and sizing that up properly to scale will help us define some of these other measurements that we don't have. Now, having said that, not all of the bar stool you can really figure out just from these few images. So you'll kind of have to utilize your judgment based upon, the dimension of this rail, to what the size of this might be. Or for instance, we know the size, the radius of, or diameter of these guys, but we don't necessarily know the diameter of this. And so it's kind of one of those up to your interpretation and kind of best guesswork, and that's not something that's going to be graded on. It's just, is the content there and does it work? Is it sized appropriately, not necessarily the exact dimensions. At least I don't think so. I haven't looked at the matrix, to be honest. But I would assume that's the case because the dimensions aren't given to us. So there are several ways to do the same thing. We're going to not utilize this trace method that I just opened up Joe Anderson's file, who was the old teacher of this course, just to look at his bar stool, and it's modeled very well. But it looks like he utilized a tracing technique in order to create this. And so we won't necessarily utilize that same technique, but that is a valid technique to use. So do I have a second Rhino open here? Yeah. So step one is to load in your image. And so if we go to, where did I find it last night? Visibility, I believe. No, view layout, sorry. We go to our view layout tab. We can find this little button that sort of looks like a picture. And if we select that, it's the same thing as typing in picture frame and hitting enter. You can go to where we save the file. Not sure which one it is. We'll try this one first. And so as I open that, click once as a base point, and using the shift key, click again, and that's not the right image. So that's awesome. What's that? Yeah, that could work. There we go. Let's do the side first, the right side. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And move this into view. You can see that basically puts it's a picture frame. It puts this object, this image on here, and we can more or less trace the image. But we need to scale it to the appropriate scale. And so if we go to our dimension or transform tool and scale, I'm debating on whether to do this 1D twice or 2D. Let's try 2D. And let's pick a base point here. I'm going to turn my grip snap off for a moment here. I'm just going to get that 1 inch dimension. Type in 1. And so I went to grab a line, or to create a line, and 5 and 12 is 17 and a half inches. Let's just do one more curve line. So it's still not quite scaled correctly. So we're going to go ahead and rescale that. I'm going to do it in the 1D fashion first. Select my object to scale. I'm going to take off some of these control points here. Let's grab the end control point, get that to snap. So that's pretty darn close in that direction. And let's create another curved line. And let's go 21.5. We can go ahead and scale that as well in the 1D direction. Take my end snap off so I can get the bottom of the chair. And put my end snap back on here. I think that's working. How's everybody doing so far? Everybody have this picture in and scaled? Yeah. Let's take 5 minutes just to get. Okay, so we have our line work fairly well established here to start off with, but we've got some minor adjustments to make. You know, through scaling these things, we have that line work to start with. But basically, the object of this is to start with the stool part. Or not the stool part, but the seat part first, and then once we have established that, we can start to create this item, the stand. So the dimension, as you can see, between this point and this point is 1 inch. So we pretty much want to offset this 1 inch so that we can draw a diagonal line through here in order to get that angle. So I'm going to go ahead and utilize the offset command. I'm just going to type it in. And I'm going to choose a distance of 1, which is up here in our command line. And if we were to do both sides, you know, you'd want to select that, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead, select that line, and offset it 1 inch. So now we can take a single line and utilize this endpoint and this endpoint to get that diagonal. And we can go ahead and delete that initial line and delete that initial line as well. And we're going to go ahead and offset this curve as well. I think is the best option here. Distance of 1. And again, we're going to draw a curved single line from this endpoint to that endpoint. And it's not exact, but I'm not too concerned about that. It's pretty darn close. And we can use the fillet command, and our radius is going to be our 4 inches here. So this line's going to be the tricky one. We don't really have a dimension from here to here to tell us what that's going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of guesswork that. So I'm going to create a line, and I'm going to utilize my near selection here to snap to this line. And I'm going to type in an angle of 60 degrees so that it snaps to 60 degrees. Maybe take off this near so it doesn't snap to my dimension line. I think I'm going to move it a little bit. So under the transform, move command, curve. I want to pick the end point. Let's try that again. Right click to start that command, curve, enter, end point, and we want to utilize the near. And I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball that. And then again, use the fillet command with the radius 4 to go ahead and get that positioned. I'm going to go ahead and move the picture frame out of the view. going to go ahead and insert the back view or the front view, and I'm just going to go ahead and place it I don't think I'm going to scale this one just because I'm really just looking for what these dimensions are at the moment. So we can go ahead and select our lines here and join them together so that they're all one line, and can select them and Control Z or Control C, Control V to copy, and then utilize the Move tool let's grab an endpoint here, and this says 15 inches. Let's go ahead and type in 15 and enter. Did I get that right? That seems like a giant chair. 156. Okay, let's try that again. Yeah, let's make a couch. 15. I'm holding the Shift key down to get that aligned correctly so that they're on the same page, basically. And we can utilize our single line endpoint in the 3D view or the top view. I like to do it in the 3D view to go ahead and connect the stool together. So basically we're creating a rail that we can go ahead and sweep a 1 inch by 1 inch square around, and we want to fillet these curves as well. And it's a bit of a sharper curve, so maybe it's half, so maybe it's a 2. So let's fillet and change our radius to being 2 inches. Right click to restart the command, and right click to restart the command. And I want to select all of these and join them together. So now we have one continuous curve. It's a 3-dimensional curve. And remember, this dimension is 1 inch, so you can go ahead and create a rectangle, and let's make it rounded, and it basically asks for the first corner. So you can just go ahead and start placing that, and we want to say 1 inch. Enter the width is 1 inch, and then the radius is 1/8. And so that's one continuous. It's already joined together. If we exploded it, it would be single line work here. We want to leave it joined. And then we can utilize our gumball tool here to just rotate it That looks pretty good. And now we want to utilize the move tool with our mid snap on and our end snap on. So that we can go ahead and move that and center it on our spline or rail, so to speak. I'm going to go ahead and select these guys and move them to the red layer, and I'm going to rename this line work. And now we can utilize our sweep one rail, select our rail, and then our object, and enter. And I'm going to change this to a layer and just rename that layer as well as chair rail. So we've defined what that is. And so if I change this to rendered view, you can see I've got the outline of this chair started. So the next step is to create, to go ahead and create the seat. So I'm going to go and hide the chair rail for now because we don't necessarily need it. And I'm going to go ahead and copy Control C, Control V, that line work so that I've got two curves. It's kind of best practice to go ahead and do that because what we're going to do is we're going to utilize one for the chair, the seat itself, and leave the other one as line work for the actual chair rail. So I'm going to choose one of these curves and I'm going to put it on a separate layer. And I'm going to rename this one chair, or maybe seat line work. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my red line work. So in order to get this seat, we need to do some line work adjustments to this in order to make this seat work. So I'm going to utilize the explode command so that we now have single line work. And that's just clicking the explode tool. Oh boy. Let's close that. And so first we need to get the seat. If we look at one of these other images, let's just bring in that last image of the seat and place him maybe right next to the front view. So we have the seat kind of stopping just a few inches down from where the radius stops here on this. And then we're going to have to, in order to split and cut this surface out, we're going to have to extend this line past our sweep line. So I'm going to go ahead and utilize a line, and I'm going to leave the end point snap on so that I can get a line between there and there. If I select it, I can go ahead and utilize the move command. And we want our near snap on. And let's just move it down. Where's my dimensions here? We basically need 16 inches from the base of this thing to where this line stops. So I'm just going to go ahead and initially place it and utilize my linear dimension. Click the end, snap back on. And I'm at 16 inches, or 15.66, so I need to move it up 0.34. I'm going to go ahead and move it, watch it snap right back to the base point of the object. So let's type in 0.34, enter, and near. So transform dimension from there to there. 15.99. Yeah, could do that too. It'll be perfect. Regardless, that's perfect right there, 15.99. And so we can go to utilize the trim tool. And I selected this line first as the cutting line, and then I hit enter, and then I picked these two lines, which then allows us to trim off the rest of this seat. Go ahead and delete that. So we've got one more step to do. We have to extend this past our chair rail, basically, so that then we can, once we create a surface, we can split that surface between the chair rail, so we get a nice tight connection there. So this tool is a little awkward to use, but we're going to type in extend, select the boundary object that you want to extend. Okay, so extend, not right. So first it asks you to select a boundary object. We don't need to select one. I'm going to press enter, and then it asks to select the curve, and so we're going to go in and select that curve. And what it allows us to do is extend it past where we had it prior. So it's a little tricky of a command because it doesn't really highlight the line, but if you've drawn it large, if you're zoomed in close enough, you can select it pretty easily. And so on the second one, I'm holding down the shift key and I've got the smart track on, so I'm able to get those two lined up to the same height. And now I'm going to go ahead and create another line. And we can go ahead and delete these. I'm going to hold the shift key to select both of those lines, and I'm going to change them to the seat line work so that they're on that layer, so we're not getting our layers confused here. Kind of following these directions. So, the funny thing about this, I suppose, is we don't really need this line work at the moment. We just needed that line. And so we want to go ahead and make sure those are all joined together. And we're going to extrude a curve. We're going to extrude this curve. Extend. Surface. Extrude curve straight. I'm going to select that guy and type in 15, as I recall. And it went the other direction. So let's try that again, typing in -15. And if we turn back on our chair rail, you can see that we're just sitting on the inside of it. So I'm going to actually use the scale tool. So I'm going to use the transform scale tool in one direction, and I'm going to turn on my midpoint here, grab my end point, and I'm just going to go ahead and scale that so that it fits just inside our rail. Go ahead and turn the chair rail back off. And we can turn our line work off, and we can put that surface on another layer. And rename this seat. So let's turn the chair rail back on, and we're going to use the split command. Let's see, is that here? That little guy right there. So we should be able to select this surface, select object to split. I didn't do that right. So let's try that split command one more time. Yeah. So I selected the object that I wanted to split, and then once I did that, I selected the chair rail, which is the splitting surface. So now I've got two separate surfaces here. We can go ahead and delete this one. And now we can offset this surface. I never know where these tools are because I'm so used to typing them in. We're just going to nicely start typing that offset surface. And I actually want to offset both sides. So distance, corner, solid, tolerance. So I thought I could offset both sides. Doesn't give me that option. Tolerance, delete, input, flip all. So if I use the flip all tool, I can change which direction we're offsetting this surface. And right now it's on the center. I could swear I could do it to both sides here. We're going to stick with our 0.25, and I'm going to offset it up. Hit enter. And basically that creates our seat. And then to just kind of make it a little bit of a nicer connection between these two, or more looking more like a seat cushion, we can fillet the edge and change our radius to maybe 1/8 of an inch. Go ahead and select. So it's just a slight curve. Bump this up a little bit. That's starting to look fairly nice. So go ahead and turn off our chair rail and change this back to wireframe. We basically need to create at the midpoint of the seat a line that we can start to sweep our stool leg from. So we need to find that center point first. I'm going to scroll in here and grab our endpoints from there to there. It just happens to not fall. Well, I guess it does fall directly on that, but sometimes it doesn't. So then we can create a line off that midpoint and go into our front view. Oh, what happened to my other picture? Did I accidentally delete it? Let's get that back. So let's go back to the picture frame tool, load in this, open. Somehow that got deleted. Just gonna switch these guys around. Back to my curved line. Get the midpoint. And it's going to be 30 inches. I'm going to type in 30, enter, hold the shift key down to select and place a straight line. So we have a tiny little bump here. If we scroll in on this, we can see we've got just like maybe 1/4 of an inch here. So we can create a circle, center radius, and it looks like to be about 1 inch off of each side. So the diameter of it, right, it's going to be 9 inches. Now we can extrude that as an extrude planar curve. And let's go 0.25 of an inch. So if we look at that in wireframe, that's the start of our base. So let's go ahead, I'm going to stop the video here and let's utilize the last 20 minutes of class to answer questions.